The crimson stain on my lips felt less like makeup and more like a declaration of war. A war I had been fighting for 3 years in the quiet trenches of my own heart, armed with nothing but hope and carefully timed text messages. Maya, if Rohan isn't slain by your charm tonight, he's blind. Stone cold blind, declared Ananya, my roommate and commander-in-chief for this evening's campaign. She was perched on the edge of my bed, her eyes critical and sweeping over me like a general inspecting troops. Exactly, chimed in Sneha from her desk, not looking up from her laptop. The man has had his chance to come to his senses. This is it. Their words, a familiar chorus of encouragement and conspiracy, wrapped around me. One praise after another had me dizzy, a pleasant champagne fizz in my veins. He asked me, remember? I said, my voice sounding breathier than I intended. I clutched the 2 printed tickets to the experimental play at the City Theatre. They were more than paper. They were a treaty, a signed agreement that after 3 years of being his comfort, his maybe, his convenient shadow, Rohan Malhotra was finally ready to step into the light with me. Yesterday, in the hushed, book-scented aisle of the library, he had leaned close, his voice a low murmur that sent shivers down my spine. Priya and it's really over this time, Maya. It's impossible. I think I want to give us, a real try. The word had echoed in my skull for 24 hours, a sacred, terrifying bell. I tossed my friends a sultry wink, practicing. Wait for my good news. The wink felt awkward, but they cheered. I turned for a final appraisal in the full-length mirror taped to our dorm room door. I saw a girl transformed, or at least expertly curated. The little black dress on Anya had forced me into hugged curves I usually hid under oversized sweaters. My dark hair, normally a frenzied cloud, was tamed into sleek waves. The red lipstick was Ananya's final touch. Power color, she'd insisted. I did one last, hopeful twirl. The skirt flared. For a second I wasn't Maya Sharma, perennial almost girlfriend. I was a leading lady. I smoothed a non-existent flyaway, took a deep breath that smelled of hairspray and anticipation, and reached for the doorknob. My phone buzzed on the dresser. The sound was innocuous, a soft purr against the wood. My heart, however, executed a nauseating lurch. Ananya's eyes met mine. It's him, she said, a statement, not a question. The room fell silent. Even Sneha's typing stopped. A part of me wanted to leave it, to stride out the door and let destiny unfold at the theater. But a larger, more conditioned part, the part that had jumped at every notification from him for 1,000 days, strode over and picked it up. A WhatsApp message. His name. A preview line. Rohan, Maya sorry. Priya and I got back together. The fizz in my veins evaporated, replaced by a slurry of ice. My thumb, moving on its own, unlocked the screen. The full message bloomed. Rohan, Maya sorry. Priya and I got back together. Find someone else for the play today. Find someone else. As if he was canceling a study session, not dismantling a fragile 3-year dream I'd foolishly let myself believe in for one glorious day. The words didn't compute at first. They were just black shapes on a bright screen. Then they translated, sinking in one by one with the precision of scalpels. Sorry. Priya and I. Back together. Find someone else. I heard a sharp intake of breath. Not mine. From the small balcony attached to our room, Ananya let out a gasp that was half shock, half fury. Maya, she whispered, her voice strained. She was staring down into the courtyard. Isn't that Rohan? I didn't want to look. My feet carried me to the balcony anyway, the tickets crumpling in my clenched fist. Leaning over the railing, the cool evening air did nothing to calm the heat rushing to my face. There he was. Rohan Malhotra. In his perfectly faded jeans and that gray sweater I loved. His dark hair was windswept. He was laughing at something. His hand wasn't in his pocket. It was entwined with another. A slender, elegant hand adorned with a silver ring I knew all too well. Priya Singh. She tossed her long, shiny hair, a move so practiced it was practically a punctuation mark, and smiled up at him. He squeezed her hand, pulling her closer to say something that made her laugh and swat his arm. It was a scene of such easy, intimate affection it stole the air from my lungs. I stepped back from the railing, the metal cold through my dress. The room had gone quiet. Sneha was now standing, her face a mask of concern. Another roommate, Jia, had come in and was frozen by the door holding a laundry basket. A chorus of concerned looks, a symphony of pity, was aimed directly at me. I felt like a specimen. The girl who got stood up. I managed to smile. It felt brittle on my face like old plaster. 17th time, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. 17th what? Jia asked softly, setting the basket down. The 17th time Rohan Malhotra has stood me up. I heard the flat, uninflected tone of my own voice, as if I was reciting a disappointing fact about a distant country. Unbelievable. Ananya exploded, storming back in from the balcony. What is he? Allergic to basic human decency? To having a spine? Her anger was a tangible, welcome heat in the cold hollow of my chest. I clutched my phone, the glass screen slick under my fingers. The fury in the room was a living thing. Sneha started drafting a scathing text in her head. I could see it on her face. Jia looked ready to march downstairs and give him a piece of her mind. Then I spoke, dousing the flames. This time, it's because he and Priya reconciled. The effect was immediate. The righteous fury vanished from their faces, replaced by a softer, more complicated look. It wasn't pity anymore. It was the weary, resigned look you give a friend who's walked into the same glass door. Ananya sighed, the fight leaving her shoulders. Maya, didn't you say they were impossible? Yesterday he told you. I know what he told me yesterday. I cut in, my voice thin. He told me they were impossible. He told me he wanted to give us a try. I swallowed, the taste of the red lipstick suddenly bitter. And today he's back with her. Sweetie, Sneha said, coming to sit beside me on the bed. Does it have to be him? Seriously, what's so great about Rohan? It was a question I'd asked myself 100 times. The answers were a pathetic, well-rehearsed list. So he's got some family money, he's unfairly good-looking, he has killer abs from rowing crew, and he's a top 3 economics student. Big deal. I recited it like a grocery list, hearing its emptiness. Ananya cut a sharp look at Jia on the top bunk. Great pep talk, but maybe stop pep talking. Then she turned her focus back to me, her expression gentling. Look, if he'd bailed for any other reason, if his dog died or he had a sudden plague, we'd be roasting him alive on a spit right now. But it's Priya, right? Jia leaned down from her bunk, her face solemn. Priya. The childhood sweetheart. The epic on-again, off-again, tragic, soul-twisted love of his life. Priya. She paused, letting the weight of the name hang in the air. Of all people, you had to go and fall for Rohan Malhotra. It's been what, 3 years? 3 years. 1,000 days of being his, hey you up? At midnight after their fights. His, you're such a good friend, Maya, after I'd listened to him vent for hours. His comfortable, reliable placeholder. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Another message from Rohan. I opened it, my vision blurring slightly, and showed it to them. Rohan. Maya, Arjun wanted to see this play yesterday but couldn't get tickets. Why don't you ask him? A follow-up. A solution. He'd not only cancelled, he'd found me a replacement. The efficiency was breathtaking. Look at that, Ananya said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Rohan even found you a stand-in. How thoughtful. Arjun who? Jia asked. Arjun Kapoor, I said, the name feeling strange on my tongue. Arjun was Rohan's roommate. A constant, baffling presence in the periphery of my Rohan-focused world. Text him, Sneha said decisively. Go with him, Jia urged. We've always said you and Arjun Kapoor make more sense anyway. Their sudden, unified excitement left me dumbfounded. I was reeling from a direct hit and they were trying to shove me onto a different lifeboat. While I was still processing, Ananya stuck out her hand. Phone. What for? I mumbled, handing it over. She scrolled to Arjun in my chats. A conversation history that consisted solely of, is Rohan there? And, can you tell him I left his book outside? And typed a new message. Me, or rather Ananya's me, play at the City Theatre. The show's in an hour. The reply was so instant it seemed preordained. Arjun, I'm in. A flurry of mischievous grins broke out among my friends. In a whirlwind of purposeful movement, they were marching me out the door, straightening my dress, shoving my clutch into my hands. Maya, there are plenty of blossoms under the sky, Ananya recited, a line from some ancient drama she loved. Don't hang yourself from one lonely, spiky tree. Exactly, Sneha added, squeezing my arm. Guys like Arjun don't come in flocks. He's solid. He likes you now. He sees the moment. Rohan only sees Priya or the ghost of Priya, or the space where Priya isn't. Their words were a bomb and a battering ram. I felt shell-shocked, hollowed out, but propelled forward by their collective will. I was a doll being redressed for a different story. At the theater entrance, the neon sign cast a garish glow on the wet pavement. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. And there, leaning against a pillar, was Arjun Kapoor. He had arrived before me. He wasn't dressed up. He wore dark jeans, a simple black Henley under a leather jacket, and an expression of calm readiness. In his hand were 2 paper cups from the cafe down the street. He pushed off the pillar as I approached and held one out to me. Here, Ty. Extra ginger, he said. His voice was a deep, steady baritone, so different from Rohan's lighter, quicker cadence. Thanks, I murmured, taking the warm cup. My fingers brushed his. He didn't flinch. He seemed to study me then, his gaze moving from my expertly styled hair to the red lips to the dress that suddenly felt like a costume. What made you ask me? He asked, his head tilted slightly. I cleared my throat. There was no point in pretty lies. The night was already stripped bare. Rohan bailed. Something shifted in Arjun's eyes. A shudder coming down. His face went carefully neutral, but a muscle ticked in his jaw. After a few beats, he grounded out the word, classic. He took a sip of his own drink, his eyes on the crowd milling about the entrance. Rohan stands you up, and only then do you remember I exist. The accusation, though softly spoken, was sharp. I hesitated. I didn't tell him it was Rohan who'd remembered him, not me. The lie of omission felt heavy. Didn't you say you really wanted to see this play and couldn't get tickets? I asked, deflecting. His expression softened a fraction, surprise flickering there. You dug that up? I was frankly speechless. Over his shoulder, I saw our reflections in the theater's glass doors. Him tall and solid. Me a shimmering, heartbroken mess. If there were an award for confident self-delusion in romance, Arjun Kapoor would take first place. No runners-up. Because for 3 years I had been Rohan's tireless, hopeful satellite. And for 3 years Arjun had been there, operating under the unshakable belief that my orbits were somehow for him. The play was a blur of avant-garde lighting and anguished monologues. I sat in the plush velvet seat, the cup of chai cradled in my hands, and understood none of it. The dialogue swirled around me, a foreign language. All I could process was the solid, quiet presence of the man beside me and the echoing silence from the phone in my clutch. 3 years. I'd been in love with Rohan for 3 years. And for 3 of those same years, Arjun Kapoor had been a baffling, persistent side character in my personal tragedy, constantly misreading his cues. My mind, desperate to escape the present humiliation, began to scroll through the archives, pulling up specific painful memories in crisp detail. Memory 1, the breakfast run. Sophomore year, 7:30 a.m. Rohan had mentioned offhand the night before that he craved the parathas from the food cart near the Humanities building. I'd set my alarm, braved the chilly morning, and waited in line for 20 minutes. I arrived at the men's dorm, a paper bag of warm, greasy goodness in my hand, just as Arjun was coming out, gym bag slung over his shoulder. His eyebrows shot up. For Rohan, he'd asked, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. I'd nodded, shivering. He's probably still asleep. You want me to take it up? I'd handed it over with relief. Thanks, Arjun. Instead of taking just one bag, he'd taken both. His other hand held a similar bag from the same cart. He'd given me a look that was equal parts amusement and something else I couldn't place. Next time, he'd said, his voice low, just buy one. Mine. Then he turned and headed back inside, leaving me blinking on the steps, the implication hanging in the frosty air. He thought I'd brought one for him too. Memory 2, the general ed class. The philosophy of modern love. I'd painstakingly matched my schedule to Rohan's just to have that one shared class, that one guaranteed hour of proximity twice a week. I'd slip into a seat a few rows behind him, content to just watch the way he tapped his pen against his notebook. One Tuesday I'd arrived late. The only seat left was directly next to Arjun. I'd slid into it, flustered. He hadn't looked at me, just kept his eyes on the professor, but as the lecture droned on, I felt his gaze drift over. When I finally glanced at him, he wore a small, private smile as if to say, "You even followed me here?" I'd spent the rest of the class burning with a mix of indignation and confusion. Memory 3. The basketball game. Rohan wasn't a starter, but he played with a fierce, elegant grace that made my heart stutter. I'd be in the stands cheering myself hoarse. Once, after a particularly grueling game, the team came off the court sweaty and triumphant. I'd weaved through the crowd, a cold water bottle in my hand, the cap already twisted off. A small, stupid, wifely gesture. Rohan was surrounded by friends, laughing. I extended the bottle towards him. From seemingly nowhere, Arjun appeared, his own jersey damp, and plucked the bottle from my fingers. He took a long, deep swig, his eyes on mine over the plastic rim. He lowered it, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and grinned. "Didn't know you were so thoughtful, Maya." Then he tossed the half-empty bottle back to me and slung an arm around a frowning Rohan, leading him towards the locker room. I'd stood there holding the contaminated bottle, feeling like a fool. The memories were endless, a tapestry of my earnest efforts being neatly folded into Arjun's narrative of a persistent, shy admirer. Him. Once, fed up and flushed with a rare burst of courage after Rohan had spent an hour crying on my shoulder about a fight with Priya, I'd confronted Arjun. It was in the library courtyard, under the skeletal branches of a winter tree. "Arjun, maybe some of the things I've done have given you the wrong idea." I'd started, my breath making little clouds in the air. "I just need to be clear. I like Rohan. I'm only ever around because of Rohan." I'd expected him to lose face, to get angry, to storm off. Instead, he just smiled. A slow, infuriating, knowing smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I was about to say yes," he'd said, shoving his hands in his pockets. "What now? Playing hard to get? All right, Maya. If you like the chase so much, I'll indulge you." I'd been too stunned to reply. He'd given me a casual salute and walked away, leaving me feeling like I was the one who'd misunderstood the entire conversation. A sudden burst of applause jerked me back to the present. The play was over. The house lights came up, harsh and revealing. I blinked, disoriented. Arjun stood, stretching his long frame. He glanced down at me. "You alive in there?" "Barely," I muttered, gathering my things. We filed out with the crowd. The night had turned properly cold, a sharp wind cutting through the thin material of my dress. I wrapped my arms around myself. Arjun shrugged off his leather jacket without a word and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy, warm from his body heat, and smelled faintly of sandalwood and rain. "Thanks," I said, my voice small. He just nodded, falling into step beside me as we began the walk back to campus. The usually chatty, confident Arjun was uncharacteristically quiet. His silence was a vast, uncomfortable space where my own chaotic thoughts ran loud. With every step, the reality of what had happened, the text, the sight of them holding hands, the finality of it, sank deeper, a cold weight in my gut. We reached the path that led to the women's dormitories. The ancient oaks lining the walkway were strung with fairy lights, casting a romantic, deceptive glow. Near the stone archway that marked the entrance to my quad, he stepped in front of me, blocking my path. My heart, already battered, gave a frightened skip. "What are you doing? Don't scare me like that." Under the amber glow of an old street lamp, his features were thrown into sharp relief. His eyes, usually sparkling with arrogant humor, were serious. Tiny stars seemed to spark in their dark depths. "Rohan and Priya got back together," he stated. An unpleasant truth laid bare. I stared at my black ballet flats, at a scuff on the toe I hadn't noticed before. "I know." "So?" he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more intimate than a shout. "How long will I not see you this time?" My foot, which had been tracing a crack in the pavement, stalled mid-motion. Ice water trickled down my spine. He knew. He wasn't delusional after all. He had observed the pattern with the cold, precise detachment of a scientist. He'd known everything. This was the 5th official reconciliation for Rohan and Priya. The cycle was as predictable as the monsoon. 1. They would have a volcanic public blow-up. 2. Rohan, wounded and lost, would find me. There would be late-night talks, tentative touches, promises of change. 3. I, the fool, would bloom with hope. For Priya would snap her fingers, sometimes in days, sometimes in weeks. 5. Rohan would vanish from my life, a ghost returning to its haunted house. And I, in a pathetic attempt at self-preservation or pride, would enact a total blackout. No contact. No mentions. I'd avoid the library wing he favored, the coffee shop he frequented, even mutual friends who might mention his name. I'd become a master of strategic disappearance. And Arjun had been counting. He'd noted the intervals. When I didn't answer, the silence stretching between us like a rubber band about to snap, he slipped back into his usual careless tone. The vulnerability was gone, shuttered away. Okay, go on up. He gestured towards the dorm. I'll buy you dinner tomorrow to repay you for the ticket. He paused and then added, the arrogance returning but softened at the edges. Can I? The softness of those 3 syllables. Can I? Did something dangerous to my already compromised defenses. It wasn't a demand. It was a request. After a night of being discarded like an old ticket, it was a lifeline thrown with surprising gentleness. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. At the dorm entrance, the scene was a cliché of university life. Couples were entangled in the shadows, doing their long, murmured goodbyes. The air was thick with the smell of rain, damp earth and young love. And one couple shone brightest, illuminated by the porch light over the main door. Rohan and Priya. My body reacted before my mind could. An instinctive, animal pivot to flee to avoid the source of the pain. I took a sharp step towards a side path. Why? His voice. Rohan's voice. It cut through the murmurs and the rustling leaves. I froze. Priya was watching too, her arm linked possessively through his. She jerked it from his grip, her beautiful face hardening into a mask of disdain. Rohan sighed, shook his head and leaned in to murmur something at her ear. I saw her resistance melt, saw a reluctant smile touch her lips. He patted her hair, a gesture so familiar it was a physical blow, and she turned to go inside. But not before cutting me a cool, dismissive glance. It wasn't quite hatred. It was worse. The contempt of a queen for a peasant who'd momentarily forgotten her place. I went a little numb. For the first time that night, the sharp, slicing pain was replaced by a dull, all-encompassing ache. A profound, weary question surfaced in the stillness of my mind. Can liking someone be a mistake? But I followed it with a defensive litany. I hadn't flirted with him while they were together. I hadn't sent him suggestive texts or tried to undermine her. I'd just been there. Available. Hopeful. What exactly was I being punished for? What line had I crossed except the line of my own self-respect? Rohan's voice reeled me back to the present. He'd walked right up, his tall frame blocking out the light. He utterly ignored Arjun at my side, who had gone very still. Hiya, Rohan began, his tone brisk, businesslike, as if he was canceling a subscription. I just deleted your WhatsApp, your number, and any other way you had to reach me too. He said it like he was doing us both a favor, performing a necessary surgical procedure. Priya doesn't want me having any contact with you. He paused, his handsome face a sculpture of mild regret. Maya, honestly, you're not my type. Even if I weren't with Priya, I still wouldn't like you. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. It wasn't the rejection that was new. It was the cruelty of its articulation. The clinical, public dissection of my undesirability. You're not my type. The words were simple, but their effect was chemical, burning through every layer of confidence I'd ever scraped together. Did it hurt? It was beyond hurt. It felt like a vacuum had opened in my chest. I couldn't breathe. Was this the same man who just yesterday had looked at me with such gentle, focused attention in the library, his voice husky as he said he wanted to give us a try? Are you finished? The voice wasn't mine. It was low, calm, and carried a blade-like edge. Arjun, who had kept quiet until now, took a half-step forward, putting himself subtly between me and Rohan. He was frowning, his earlier playful demeanor completely vanished, replaced by something cold and formidable. Was that really necessary? Arjun asked, his eyes locked on Rohan. Did Priya tell you to say that, or was it your own idea? Scenes like this were unbearable. The humiliation was now a triple-layered thing. My own Rohan's callous delivery of it, and now Arjun witnessing the entire sordid spectacle. I couldn't stand it. I reached out and tugged on the sleeve of his leather jacket, which I was still wearing. It was almost a pleading gesture. Could you go first? I whispered, my voice cracking. This is between me and him. Arjun drew in a long, slow breath, his shoulders tense. He shot Rohan one last glare, a look that promised this wasn't over, and then to my immense relief and shame he turned and walked away, melting into the shadows of the quad. His absence left me feeling exposed but also strangely clear. I forced myself to steady my breathing, ignoring the panic burning like acid in my chest. I lifted my chin and looked at Rohan. I even managed to smile. It felt ghastly. "Anything else you need to say?" His pretty eyes, the ones I'd spent years writing poetry about in my mind, narrowed slightly. He seemed unsettled by my calm. "Let's not see each other again." He actually thought there was a risk we would. The arrogance was astounding. "Please," I thought, a hysterical laugh bubbling inside me. I might have been a simp, but I still have a bottom line. After a slap in the face that loud, how pathetic would I have to be not to finally quit? "Relax," I said a little impatiently. "We won't." I started to turn away. "Anything else?" He paused. Something murky flickered in his gaze. Not regret, but perhaps a flicker of confusion that his clean, surgical cut wasn't eliciting the expected tears or pleas. "Go date someone," he said finally, as if granting me a royal pardon to move on from his glorious presence. With that he turned and walked back towards the dorm, his stride confident as if he'd finally tidied up a messy, lingering problem. I stood there for a long time, the chill of the night seeping through the borrowed jacket and into my bones. The fairy lights twinkled mockingly. I felt as though 3 years of persistence, of early morning parathas and carefully chosen class schedules and bottled-up feelings, had curdled in an instant, turning into a joke everyone had been in on except me. Sometimes letting go is a new beginning. The voice, so unlike his usual teasing tone, floated down from above and to my side. Soft. Uninflected. I turned. He was leaning against the stone archway, half in shadow. He hadn't left. He just moved to a respectful distance, a silent sentinel. "You didn't leave," I stammered, my carefully constructed composure cracking. Arjun pushed himself off the wall and walked over. He didn't touch me. He just held out a single packet of tissue, the kind you get from a street vendor. It was printed with a cartoon of a ridiculously cheerful bear holding a heart. "Don't cry," he said, his voice gruff. "Wipe your eyes." I stared at the cutesy packet and something inside me broke. A choked-up sound, half laugh, half sob, escaped my lips. "Do you also like buying tissues with cartoon bears?" Arjun froze for a second, then his lips quirked. "You left that on the theater seat. Along with your dignity, I think." I took the tissue, the absurdity of it overwhelming me. I dabbed at my eyes, which were, to my surprise, dry. The tears seemed frozen inside. "Oh," I said, my voice small. "Is it really that bad?" He studied my face. "Is what that bad?" I nodded, clutching the silly tissue. I thought I was used to it. To him. To this cycle. But this time feels different. Different how? He tilted his head, his gaze intent, as if my answer was the most important thing in the world. I pressed a hand to my chest, over the hollow, aching space. "This time," I whispered, the truth of it crystallizing as I said it aloud, "I think I'm really done." His reaction was immediate and visible. A tension I hadn't even fully registered in his posture melted away. His happiness wasn't a smile. It was a light that switched on behind his eyes, a subtle softening of his entire face. He checked his watch, an old-fashioned analog one on a leather strap. "It's not closing time yet," he announced. "What isn't?" "O'Malley's. The pub off campus. They have decent whiskey. And terrible karaoke, which we will avoid." He looked at me, a challenge in his eyes. "Drinks." I thought for 2 seconds. Going back to the dorm meant facing my roommate's sympathy, replaying the night in the silence of my own bunk. Going with Arjun meant noise, distraction, and the strange, comforting shield of his presence. "My tolerance is usually fine," I warned him, a flicker of my old self returning. He finally smiled, a real one that reached his eyes. "Let's go." O'Malley's was a cave of warm, yeasty air, scratched wood, and the low hum of a dozen murmured conversations. It was the kind of place where the lights were dim enough to hide puffy eyes and the music was just loud enough to drown out thinking. Arjun guided me to a high-backed booth in a corner, his hand a fleeting, steadying pressure on the small of my back. He ordered 2 whiskeys, neat. I didn't protest. The first sip was fire, tracing a burning path down my throat and pooling heat in my empty stomach. The second sip was courage. "Bastard," I said, the word landing softly on the table between us. I wasn't looking at him. Total bastard, Arjun echoed immediately, his voice a low rumble of agreement. He wasn't placating me, he was enlisting. It unlocked something. A complete, utter, spineless bastard, I added, slamming my glass down a little too hard. The amber liquid sloshed. Doesn't even like me and still keeps me dangling like a spare key. Gives hope then just crushes it. Why do that? If you don't like someone, why send mixed signals? Why say things like, give us a try? My voice was rising, the whiskey and the pent-up years fueling it. Arjun leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his gaze fierce. Because it's easy. Because you were there. Because it feels good to be wanted even if you don't want back. It's emotional tourism, Maya. He was visiting your heart because his usual resort was temporarily closed. The accuracy of it was another kind of burn. I brushed his hand off my back, he'd placed it there again, a comforting anchor, and peered at him through the gloom. My head was starting to spin, the edges of the room softening. Hey, I said, pointing a wavering finger at him. Don't curse at random. I didn't string you along. You were the one who misunderstood. And I explained. Under the tree. I was very clear. He smiled then, but it was a smile without warmth, a bitter twist of his lips. Right. I was delusional. A 3-year delusion. My mistake. Fresh, hot tears pricked at my eyes, summoned by the self-pity in his statement and the roaring injustice of my own situation. Ugh, who isn't a little delusional? I cried, the tears spilling over. I clinked my glass violently against his. If I hadn't clung to that sliver of hope that Rohan might one day see me as something other than a convenient emotional napkin, who would volunteer for this? Who signs up to be a stand-in? To be the understudy who never gets to go on? Someone with a terrible director, Arjun said flatly, but he was watching me cry, his own anger seeming to drain away, replaced by a weary tenderness. He pushed a fresh napkin towards me. This one had the pub's logo. I lost track after that. The glasses were refilled. The fire in my belly became a roaring blaze, and the blaze melted the cold, numb ache into a slurry of sorrow and reckless abandon. More. I talked about the first time I saw Rohan, a freshman orientation leader with a megaphone and a smile that felt like the sun. I talked about the first time he cried to me about Priya, and how I'd felt chosen, special, trusted. I talked until the words slurred and the pub lights blurred into golden streaks. The last coherent memory I have is of Arjun's face, swimming in and out of focus, his expression unreadable. And the feeling of his arm around me, solid as an oak, as he guided me out into the shocking cold of the night. I woke to the specific, profound silence of a strange room. It wasn't the muffled silence of my dorm, punctuated by snores and the hum of the mini-fridge. This was a deep, masculine quiet. My head was a balloon filled with wet sand, throbbing with a dull, relentless rhythm. My mouth tasted like ashes and regret. Panic, cold and slick, shot through me before I even opened my eyes. Where am I? I flung back the covers, a thick gray duvet, and looked down. I was still in the little black dress, though it was twisted and wrinkled. My tights were gone. My shoes were neatly placed side by side on a rag rug next to the bed. I exhaled a shuddering breath that fogged in the chill morning air. Thank God. My mind was a white haze. The play, the walk, the whiskey, then nothing. A cinematic blackout. I slid out of the bed, my bare feet hitting cool hardwood. The room was sparse but tidy. A large desk held a powerful-looking laptop and stacks of engineering textbooks. A shelf held a few trophies, basketball, debating, and some framed photos I couldn't make out without my glasses. The walls were painted a dark navy. It smelled faintly of clean linen, sandalwood, and boy. Arjun's place. I'd been here before, but only in the living room during larger parties. I'd never been in his bedroom. A fresh wave of disorientation hit me. I cracked the bedroom door and peered out. The living room was familiar. The large, worn-in leather sofa, the massive TV, the wall of vinyl records. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, striping the floor. Just then, a figure emerged from the kitchenette off the living room, carrying 2 plates. Arjun, wearing sweatpants and a faded university t-shirt, his hair damp and tousled as if from a recent shower. When he saw me hovering in the doorway, 2 distinct, suspicious blushes bloomed high on his cheekbones. He cleared his throat, looking suddenly flustered. Quit gawking. Go wash up. Breakfast is ready. Oh, I said dumbly and padded towards the bathroom he pointed to, my mind reeling. The bathroom was steamy, smelling of his body wash, something cedar and citrus. I splashed cold water on my face, avoiding my reflection. When I came out, he'd set the plates on a small dining table. Scrambled eggs, toast, cut fruit. Simple. Perfect. We ate in a silence that grew more charged with each passing minute. Even when we were nearly done, the high color hadn't fully left his cheeks. He kept his eyes on his plate, uncharacteristically shy. Arjun, I finally ventured, my voice raspy from the whiskey and sleep. What? Why is your face so red? He looked up and his gaze was hot, intense, locking onto mine with a force that made me want to squirm. Guess. No, I said, putting my fork down. Say it or don't. I have a hangover. I can't play games. He gave a short, humorless laugh and leaned forward across the small table, until I could feel the warmth of his breath. Maya, you're heartless. What did I do? You forced a kiss on me last night. You don't remember. I nearly choked on my last bite of toast. I took a frantic gulp of water. My mind scrambled, clawing at the black void of memory. Nothing. Not a flicker. Setting aside the seismic shock of the claim itself, I forced a kiss on him. His prolonged virginal blush was ridiculous. Suppose drunk me had pecked him. Was that enough to keep him looking like a scandalized Victorian gentleman hours later? You sure you're not running a fever? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He gave another one of those short laughs and leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You really don't remember pinning me to the sofa and kissing me? His eyes flicked to the leather sofa in question, then back to me, dark and challenging. Want me to jog your memory? No need. I said, too quickly, too loudly. I lifted a hand to push him back to create space and oops, my fingers brushed his cheek. It was incredibly, unexpectedly soft. The contact sent a jolt through me, a spark that traveled from my fingertips straight to my already racing heart. I jerked my hand back as if burned. I gulped down the rest of my water to cover the sudden panic. Anyway, I said, standing up abruptly, the chair legs scraping against the floor. I'm full. I'm going back to the dorm. He lounged back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. The color had finally begun to leave his face, and his familiar mask of amused arrogance was sliding back into place. Maya, he said, drawing out my name. What? Why are you so red? I crouched down to hunt for my shoes, my face flaming. Fever, I muttered, not looking at him. Yes, you gave it to me. A rich, genuine laugh burst from him. Wow. I haven't even done anything yet and it's contagious. That's a powerful strain. I had my shoes on and was already halfway to the door when his voice floated after me, warm and laced with stifled laughter. Dinner. Chongqing hot pot. My treat. 7 o'clock. I didn't turn back, just raised a hand in a vague wave of acknowledgement and fled out the door into the bright, sobering Saturday morning. It was only in the elevator going down that I replayed his words. I haven't even done anything yet. The implication, that he intended to do something, sent a fresh, confusing tremor through me that had nothing to do with the hangover. Back at the dorm, it was empty and still. The silence was a relief. I showered, washing away the smell of smoke and whiskey and the lingering phantom scent of sandalwood. I wrapped myself in my softest sweats and fell into my bunk, the thrumming in my head finally subsiding into a bearable ache. Right before drifting off into a heavy, dreamless sleep, his line replayed on a loop in the darkness behind my eyelids. You really don't remember pinning me to the sofa and kissing me? My mind, now rested and no longer drowning in alcohol, snapped clear. I sat up in the dim room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I touched my own cheek where I'd touched his. It was scalding. Was I actually feverish? The night wind had been chilly. It was possible. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Then I remembered Rohan had deleted me. This was new. Unknown number. Don't forget dinner. I'll pick you up at 7. It's Arjun. Saved my number. Second followed. Arjun, and yes, I asked Ananya for your number. Don't be mad. I stared at the screen. He could really nag. Repeating the same invitation he'd just yelled after me. A strange, fluttery feeling replaced some of the hangover nausea. I typed back. Me okay. I was about to lock my screen when I saw my chat with Rohan, now just a blank entry titled, deleted account. On an impulse I opened my social media. He hadn't blocked me. I could still see his profile. Same avatar. But his cover photo was now a couple shot. A sunset picture, him and Priya silhouetted, her head on his shoulder. Posted last night. The caption was a simple heart emoji. I braced myself. I waited for the usual stabbing tightness, the breath that wouldn't come, the acid wash of jealousy. I pressed a palm to my heart, a diagnostician waiting for the pain. But this time nothing. There was a dull ache, yes, but it was the ache of a spent bruise, not a fresh wound. The photo didn't make a ripple. It was just an image of two people who belonged in a story that was no longer mine. How strange. Can letting go happen this suddenly? Sudden enough that the visual proof of their epic love felt irrelevant? A cold, clean clarity washed over me. Expressionless, I went beyond the social media. I found his contact in my phone's hidden, deleted contacts folder and permanently erased it. I blocked his number. I unfollowed him on every last platform. I removed myself from the shared online study group we were in. When I finished, I flopped back onto my pillows. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. Scoured clean. Oddly reborn. The hot pot restaurant that night was a cacophony of sizzling broths and shouting waiters. Arjun was already at the table, commanding a spread of raw meats, vibrant vegetables, and mysterious sauces. He grilled the meat for me, dipping each perfectly cooked slice into a savory sauce before placing it on my plate. He told terrible jokes. He argued passionately about the best brand of chili oil. He was, in a word, wonderful. Not a single mention of the previous night's alleged kiss or of Rohan or of anything painful. After that night, Arjun started asking me out to eat every other day. Sushi, pizza, a dubious-looking food truck that served the best kebabs I'd ever had. In barely a month, we'd almost eaten our way across the entire north side of the city. It was easy. It was fun. It was a distraction that slowly, without me noticing, became the main event. It was a Tuesday and the sky was the color of old dishwater, threatening rain. Arjun's car, a battered but reliable sedan, idled at the curb outside my dorm. He leaned on the open passenger window, his smile a familiar, welcome sight. "What do you want today?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I didn't get in. I hugged my books to my chest and stepped closer, a mischievous impulse taking hold. "I don't want to eat out," I declared. "I'm going to the cafeteria. Tofu Tuesday." His smile didn't falter. "Coming," he said, but made no move to get out of the car. "But I already booked that Hunan place. The one with the triple pepper fish you were drooling over last week." "Then why ask me?" I shot back, raising an eyebrow. "I wanted to see if we're on the same wavelength." He shrugged, the picture of innocence. "Test concluded, absolutely not." I made a show of turning to go. "Fine. Enjoy your fancy fish." "Hey." The panic in his voice was poorly concealed and utterly satisfying. I paused, looking over my shoulder. He was half out of the car now. "Didn't you say a few days ago you were craving Hunan?" "It took me 3 days to get this reservation. They're booked out for weeks." I hesitated, the memory of the aromatic, numbing cuisine making my mouth water. He saw my weakness and sweetened the deal, his voice dropping to a coaxing murmur. "Super authentic. The chili oil is made in-house. The fish is so fresh it practically swims to your table." I got in the car. He laughed, a rich, victorious sound as he settled into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb. The restaurant, Spice Heaven, was a cramped, bustling hole in the wall with red lanterns and the pervasive, glorious smell of roasting chilies and Szechuan peppercorns. The queue snaked out the door. Arjun gave his name and we were whisked inside, past the waiting throng. He shot me a smug look. Then his expression changed. As we followed the hostess through the narrow aisle between tightly packed tables, his steps slowed. His eyes scanned the room, his face shifting through a series of emotions. Recognition, annoyance, concern. "What now?" I asked, nudging him forward. He hemmed and hawed, uncharacteristically flustered. Maybe we should just go back to campus. Try the tofu. I'm suddenly feeling very collegiate." I nudged him aside, peering around his broad shoulder. And I saw them. At a prime corner table illuminated by the glow of a red lantern, sat Rohan and Priya. They were leaning over a steaming pot sharing a dish. Rohan was feeding her a bite from his chopsticks. It was a scene of such casual reclaimed intimacy that it should have been a punch to the gut. But it wasn't. My stomach didn't drop. My breath didn't hitch. I felt a strange, detached curiosity as if observing exotic animals at a zoo. So this is what they do on a Tuesday. Arjun was watching my face closely. If you're uncomfortable or if it's awkward, we can go somewhere else. Seriously. The kebabs are just around the corner. To make sure I heard over the din, he bent close to my ear. His breath tickled my skin, warm and tinged with the scent of mint. I shivered before I could help it. Across the room, Rohan looked up. His eyes met mine, then flicked to Arjun, bent close to me. A dark, unreadable look passed over his face. Why would I be uncomfortable? I said, pulling back slightly and giving Arjun what I hoped was a convincing smile. I'm fine. I'm starving. Seeing my calm, Arjun let it drop, though I caught him glancing at me a couple of times as we were led to our table. Our table, as fate and terrible floor planning would have it, was directly next to theirs, separated only by a low wooden partition adorned with plastic bamboo. I was ready to pretend we were strangers, to lose myself in the menu. But Priya spoke first. Her voice, sweet as artificially flavored syrup, cut through the restaurant's chatter. Oh Maya. What a surprise. Her gaze flicked between me and Arjun with the precision of a scalpel. Are you two together? The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. I felt Arjun go still beside me. I looked directly at her, unable to muster even a polite smile. My sixth sense, honed by years of her subtle barbs, screamed that she didn't mean me any good. No, I said flatly. I paused, then added, are we close? A flicker of annoyance crossed her perfectly made-up face. Forgive me. Under the circumstances, I had zero interest in small talk, zero interest in playing her games. Arjun kept things from going flat. Still looking at Rohan, who was studying his teacup with intense interest, Arjun answered her question. Soon, he said, two neat, confident syllables. I lowered my head and pretended to be absorbed by the tea list, neither confirming nor denying. The word, soon, echoed in my head, not unpleasantly. Priya turned to Rohan, her voice dialing up the sugar. Rohan, I thought she liked you. Looks like I was jealous for nothing. She gave a little laugh, tinkling and false. I glanced at the two of them. Rohan's face stayed an unreadable mask. He didn't answer her. He just looked at me, then at Arjun, his eyes opaque, shadowed. After a long, tense moment, he tipped out a cold smile. It didn't reach his eyes. Who knows who she likes? He said, his voice carrying clearly over the low partition. But changing targets that fast is eye-opening. He let his gaze rest on Arjun, a challenge in them. Me. His look seemed to say. He'd said his piece. He stood up at once, throwing his napkin on the table. Let's go, he told Priya, his tone brooking no argument. Priya, thrown by his sudden change of face and the abrupt end to their meal, looked a little lost. She hurried after him, gathering her purse. Then she glanced back over her shoulder, her brows knitted together, and shot me a vicious look that was pure, undiluted venom. The air at our table felt charged, brittle. I picked up my own teacup, taking a slow sip. Did those two take something sour? I asked Arjun, dead serious. Why do I feel like I'm under attack for the crime of eating fish? Arjun's face had been dark, a storm cloud, but at that he laughed. The sound was a release of tension. He reached over and ruffled my hair, a gesture so fond it made my heart squeeze. He agreed, his voice gentle. And badly. The rest of the meal was delicious, spicy, and uneventful. But the encounter left a residue. It was a reminder that the past wasn't a closed book. It was a ghost that could materialize at any corner table. A week later, the ghost decided to haunt a birthday party. Arjun's birthday bash was legendary. It was held in a rented loft space downtown, all exposed brick and industrial chic. Fairy lights were strung from steel beams, and a thumping bass line vibrated through the floor. I hit traffic and arrived late, a wrapped gift in my hand, a vintage record from a band he loved. I'd barely taken 2 steps into the hall, smoothing my dress, when I heard it. A little group clustered near the makeshift bar, their voices not quite drowned by the music. They weren't being quiet. In fact, they seemed to want to be overheard. Hey, isn't that Maya Sharma? A girl's voice, sharp and familiar. One of Priya's orbiters. God, why did she come? Talk about thick skin. Priya, is she still clinging to Rohan? I thought that was over. This was directed at Priya, who stood at the center of the group, a glass of wine in her hand. Priya cut me a cold, sideways look, a smirk playing on her lips. No idea. She took a sip. What a tragedy. Another girl giggled, a mean tinkling sound. I heard that since Rohan won't give her the time of day, she started hanging off Arjun. They're always together. At the library getting coffee. And in family money and looks, Arjun is no worse than Rohan, another pointed out as if analyzing stock. She's got moves, you have to give her that. Upgrading within the same friend group. Efficient. She even bros around with him, the first girl sneered. Isn't that textbook pick-me behavior? One of the guys until it's convenient. Priya gave a little laugh, swirling her wine. Arjun and Rohan are closest. Have been since freshman year. Who knows what she thinks she's doing? Maybe she's trying to make Rohan jealous. Pathetic, really. My face must have been a sight. I felt the heat rise from my chest to my throat, staining my cheeks. My reputation, already collateral damage in the Rohan-Priya wars, was now being shredded into something new and ugly. A calculating social climber, a pick-me, a homewrecker by proxy. My options flashed before me. Charge in and trade insults? Oh, too many of them. Throw my drink? Tempting, but I'd likely miss and ruin my own dress. Forward. My pride, newly rediscovered, screamed in protest. I couldn't. I just shifted my weight, preparing to either flee or advance, when the birthday boy himself came gliding down from the second-floor mezzanine. Arjun wore a sharp navy shirt and a pleasant host-like smile. That smile froze, then hardened as he took in the scene, me standing like a statue and the gossipy hive a few feet away. He stopped beside them. What are we chatting about? He asked, his voice deceptively light. Let me hear it too. Sounds fascinating. The laughter and chatter cut off as if guillotined. They looked at each other, then at their drinks, saying nothing. The air thickened, grew heavy. The music from the speakers felt suddenly intrusive. Arjun's smile grew colder, more fixed. Go on, he urged, his tone pleasant but with an undercurrent of steel. Weren't you all so lively a minute ago? Priya lowered her voice, attempting a placating tone. Arjun, we're all classmates here. Friends. No need to make it awkward. Oh, Arjun said, his pretty eyes flicking to her. Now it's awkward. He said it mildly, almost thoughtfully. Then his gaze swept the group. Well, take your time. I won't keep you. He gave them a polite, dismissive smile. A collective, barely audible exhale. They thought they were being let off the hook. They started to turn, to dissipate. In the next breath, Arjun hurled the crystal tumbler in his hand. It wasn't aimed at anyone. It was aimed at the floor, directly at Priya's feet. Frick. The sound was a gunshot in the sudden silence that had gripped our little corner of the party. The glass shattered, skittering across the polished concrete in 1,000 glittering shards. Priya let out a short, sharp scream and jumped back, her wine sloshing over her hand. Arjun's smile turned cherubic, innocent. Oops. He didn't sound sorry at all. Sorry. Guess the glass felt awkward too, so it shattered. Priya's face went from pale to iron blue with fury and shock. The entire party had now noticed. A ring of stunned faces surrounded us. Arjun looked over at Rohan, who'd hurried over at the sound, his expression a mixture of alarm and anger. Keep your girlfriend in line, Arjun said, his voice cutting through the music that someone had wisely turned down. Then he turned to me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't say a word. He simply clamped his hand around mine, his grip firm and warm, and headed for the door, pulling me through the parted crowd without another glance at the wreckage he'd left behind. Even Rohan, usually so cool and composed, looked rattled. He didn't spare Priya a glance. His eyes were fixed on Arjun's hand around mine, a complex storm of emotions raging in his gaze. Arjun. Rohan called out, taking a step forward. Where are you going? It's your birthday. I was puzzled too, pulled along in his wake. Yeah, this is your party. Home, Arjun said, not raising his voice, but the word carried, final and absolute. He didn't break stride. Watching certain gossipers here makes me sick. He tilted his head slightly as we reached the door, and threw one last line over his shoulder, a pronouncement for the whole room. And for the record, I'm the one pursuing Maya. He hasn't said yes. If you don't know the facts, don't make them up. The cold night air outside was a slap, a baptism. He didn't let go of my hand until we reached his car. The drive to Arjun's apartment was silent, but it wasn't the tense silence of the restaurant. This was a thick, buzzing quiet, charged with the aftershocks of his explosive defense and the warmth of his hand still imprinted on mine. He drove with a focused intensity, his jaw set. Once inside, the familiar scent of sandalwood and clean linen enveloped me, a balm after the noisy, perfumed aggression of the party. Arjun went straight to the kitchen, his movements jerky. He filled a kettle and slammed it on the stove. I hovered by the sofa, the sight of the alleged kiss I still couldn't remember. "You didn't have to do that," I finally said, my voice small in the quiet apartment. "Yes," he said, not turning around. "I did." The kettle began to whistle, a shrill scream. He poured 2 mugs of tea, chamomile, and brought them over. He handed one to me, our fingers brushing. "They don't get to talk about you like that." "No one does." I took the mug, letting the heat seep into my palms. "You ruined your own birthday party." He finally looked at me, and the anger had drained from his face, leaving behind something raw and weary. "That wasn't my party. That was a room full of people I'm supposed to like. This," he gestured between us, then at the cozy, quiet room, "this is better." He sat down heavily on the sofa, patting the space beside him. I joined him, leaving a careful foot of cushion between us. We sipped our tea. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me hollow and shaky. "I didn't get my birthday noodles," he said after a while, a non sequitur that made me blink. "What?" "Longevity noodles. It's a thing. You're supposed to eat them on your birthday for a long life." He gave me a sideways glance, a ghost of his usual smirk returning. I was looking forward to them. The absurdity of it. This towering, fierce man who had just shattered glass in a room of 200 people, now pouting about missing noodles, hit me. A laugh bubbled out of me, unexpected and relieving. "You're impossible." "I'm deprived," he corrected, his eyes lighting up at my laugh. "Fine," I said, setting my mug down. "Your kitchen. Your birthday. I'll make you your noodles." He beamed, the storm clouds completely gone, replaced by pure, boyish delight. "Really?" 20 minutes later, he was hunched over the coffee table, devouring a simple bowl of stir-fried noodles I'd thrown together with garlic, soy, and the last of his spring onions. He ate with the single-minded focus of a starved man, declaring them perfect between mouthfuls. I watched him, a strange fondness swelling in my chest. This was the real Arjun, not the arrogant front he put on, not the furious protector. This was just a guy who liked noodles and didn't like people being mean to his what? His pursuit. His almost girlfriend? The thought sent a flutter through me. 3 months. It had been 3 months since the night of the play. 3 months of near-daily texts, shared meals, inside jokes, and his steady, unwavering presence. A lot can happen in 3 months. We'd been chatting daily, swapping good mornings and good nights, meeting up whenever our schedules allowed. We'd grown closer and closer in a way that felt natural, inevitable. It dawned on me with the force of a revelation. How is this any different from dating? The realization made my cheeks warm. I fanned my face subtly with my hand, ordering my brain to stop its treacherous line of thought. I was supposed to be healing, not jumping into another potential disaster. The cushion dipped deeply as Arjun sat back down beside me, having washed his bowl. This time he didn't leave the careful foot of space. He sat right next to me, his thigh a solid line of heat against mine. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. My ears felt hot. I scooted an inch away, creating a sliver of cool cushion. He slid right along with me, eliminating the distance. His voice was a low, coaxing rumble in the quiet room, his eyes locked on my profile. "What are you nervous about?" "I'm not nervous," I insisted, my voice betraying me with a slight tremor. "Who's nervous?" His words, his proximity rattled me. I leaned back into the sofa cushions, seeking an escape. My arm slipped off the back of the sofa, throwing me slightly off balance, and suddenly he was looming over me, one hand planted on the cushion by my head, caging me in. The angle was undeniably suggestive. Intimate. The streetlight from the window cast a diagonal slash of gold across his face, highlighting the intent in his eyes. "If you're not nervous," he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips, "why won't you look at me?" A challenge. A dare. My pride, newly fortified, surged. Who says I won't? I forced myself to meet his eyes, widening my own in a defiant stare. Laughter, warm and rich, pulled at the corners of his mouth. He dipped his head slowly, giving me every chance to pull away to say no. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. His lips brushed the corner of my mouth. It was the lightest touch, a question. I froze, every nerve ending screaming to life. He pulled back a millimeter, his eyes searching mine. Haya, he whispered, my name a prayer on his lips. It's been 3 months. He brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, his touch unbearably gentle. Give me a title. I don't know who closed the final distance. Maybe I leaned forward the fraction of an inch. Maybe he did. But the second kiss wasn't a question. It was an answer. His mouth was soft and sure on mine. It was nothing like I'd ever imagined a kiss could be. There was no hesitation, no taking, only a confident, giving warmth that melted my bones and set my blood singing. One of his hands cradled the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair, while the other settled on my waist, pulling me closer until not a sliver of light could pass between us. It was slow and deep and thorough, a conversation without words. It tasted of chamomile and him, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never known I'd been searching for. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I slumped against him, my forehead resting on his shoulder. His heart was hammering against my cheek, a wild, frantic rhythm that mirrored my own. He chuckled, the sound vibrating through his chest and into mine. He finger-combed my tangled hair, his touch tender. So, he said, his voice husky, you did go brush your teeth after the noodles. I groaned, burying my face deeper. Lemon, I mumbled. My toothpaste is lemon. Nice, he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. He shifted then, settling me more comfortably so I was straddling his lap, facing him. Our faces were level. His hands rested on my hips, a possessive, comfortable weight. His eyes were dark, pupils blown wide, but the amusement was still there. So, not bad, right? For a forced kiss, I mean. I swatted his arm, but I was laughing, truly laughing, the sound bright and free in the quiet room. He caught my hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender it stole my breath. Being with Arjun, officially being with him, was like stepping into the sun after a long, gray winter. It was easy in a way that made my previous 3 years feel like a complicated, painful math equation I'd been failing. With Arjun it was simple arithmetic. We added up. It was texts about silly things we saw during the day. It was him bringing me coffee during my brutal early morning study sessions. It was meeting his friends as his girlfriend and seeing the genuine approval in their eyes. It was a silly argument over the best Star Wars movie that ended with a popcorn fight in his living room. Another 3 months slipped by in a happy, sun-drenched blur. We were leaving a late-night indie film, huddled together against a chilly autumn wind, when a notification popped up on my phone. A friend request. Rohan Malhotra wants to be friends. The message preview below. Maya about before. Sorry. Priya and I broke up. Do you have time to grab dinner this week? The world seemed to tilt on its axis for a second. I hadn't heard his name, hadn't seen his face in over 6 months. It was like a ghost from a past life tapping me on the shoulder. Arjun, his arm around me, felt me stiffen. He glanced down at the phone in my hand. His face, which had been relaxed and smiling, clouded over in an instant, dark as the thunderheads gathering over the city skyline. I waggled the phone, my throat tight. I didn't accept. He doesn't know about us? Arjun's voice was flat. I haven't posted anything sappy online. You haven't been back to the dorm this week. You haven't talked to him. My words came out in a rush. He snorted, a harsh, unhappy sound. Oh, I've talked to him. Just not about you. There was a story there, a tension between them I hadn't been privy to. I handed him my phone and offering a gesture of transparency. What do you want me to do? Reply if you want or don't. Delete it and pretend we never saw it. His jaw worked. He took the phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. The conflict on his face was clear. The jealous boyfriend warring with the man who trusted me. Finally, the storm in his eyes receded a fraction. He tapped on the message and typed a reply not in the chat, but on the friend request screen itself. A public rebuttal only Rohan would see. He has a boyfriend. Please don't contact her. He hit send and handed the phone back, his mouth a grim, unyielding line. I took it, a wave of relief washing over me. He'd chosen trust, but he'd also drawn a firm, clear boundary. I leaned up and kissed his stubbled cheek. Easy to coax, I whispered. The line of his mouth finally unflattened into something resembling a smile. He pulled me closer, tucking me under his arm as we walked. Don't make a habit of it. I laughed, nestling into his side, thinking that was the end of it. The ghost had been acknowledged and dismissed. I was wrong. Human nature, it seems, loves to test a boundary once it's been drawn. Early spring in the city was a capricious flirt, one day offering gentle sunshine, the next lashing out with a chilly, biting wind. It was on one of those bitter evenings that Arjun cut off towards the men's dorm to grab a textbook he needed for a study session at my place. Don't bother walking me, I said, pulling my scarf tighter. It's freezing. I'll see you at the apartment in 20. He hesitated, then nodded, pressing a quick, cold kiss to my lips. 20 minutes. Don't get kidnapped. I watched him stride away, a tall, reassuring silhouette against the twilight, before turning towards my own dorm. The fairy lights in the oak trees were back on, but they offered no warmth, only a festive, mocking glow. I saw him before he saw me. Rohan. He stood under the arched entrance to my dorm, a figure in a long black wool coat. He was handsome in a way that was now purely aesthetic to me, like a sculpture in a museum, admirable but devoid of personal meaning. His hands were shoved in his pockets, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He'd been there a while. I could tell by the stillness of his posture, the way he was rooted to the spot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Our dorm group chat was exploding. Ananya. Maya, what's going on? Sneha. Rohan's been camped downstairs for almost 2 hours. Ja, we saw Priya go down. They barely spoke and she came back up crying. Drama. I typed back as I walked, my steps not slowing. Me. They're just revving up the tragic romance act again. Place your bets. How long till they're back together this time? Ananya, finally. That's the spirit. Yeah, good. Half a year. He looks properly miserable. Ja, no way. 3 months max. The crying is a good sign. It means it's epic. I kept chatting, a small, cynical smile on my face, and planned to walk straight past him. I was a woman with a destination, a boyfriend waiting, a life that had moved definitively on. Maya. His voice. It was thinner than I remembered, strained by the cold or something else. I ignored it, focusing on the glow of my phone screen. Maya. He called out again, louder, and took a few quick steps, cutting off my path to the door. I had to stop. I looked up, letting every ounce of my impatience show on my face. What is it, Rohan? It was funny, the alchemy of time and pain. If you told me 6 months ago that I'd be annoyed by Rohan Malhotra seeking me out, I'd have called you a liar. Now, looking at that still perfect face, the high cheekbones, the deep-set eyes that had once held my entire universe, I felt only a profound irritation. Not a flicker of the old swoon, the heart-hammering anticipation. Just the impatience of someone being delayed. He stammered, uncharacteristically unsure. My brows pulled tight. Why did every inch of him now rub me so completely the wrong way? The way he stood, the entitled expectation in his eyes, the very fact of his presence after his last brutal words to me. Spit it out, I said, my voice crisp in the cold air. I'm busy. If it's nothing, I'm going up. Can we? He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. Can we still be friends? I blinked. Fully. I let the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the question hang between us for a 5 count. The wind whistled through the archway. Short on friends, are you? I finally asked, my tone devoid of malice, simply curious. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Good. I didn't let him recover. I cut in, my words sharp and clear, each one a stone laid on the grave of my old feelings. Rohan, remember? About 6 months ago. Right here. You said we shouldn't see each other again. You told me I wasn't your type. That even if you were single, you wouldn't like me. I took a step closer, not out of intimacy but for emphasis. And now you're here in the cold asking if we can be friends? You don't find that the least bit ridiculous? He was silent, his breath coming in white puffs. Yes, I continued, the dam breaking. I did like you. A lot. For a long time. Every time you and Priya hit a snag and you were single, you'd crook a finger and I'd come running like a well-trained idiot. But did you ever for 1 second take my feelings seriously? Or was I just a warm body to fill the silence between your epic love stories? He opened his mouth but no sound came out. People get tired, Rohan. My voice dropped but lost none of its edge. You smash into a wall enough times you learn to turn around. I've turned around. I don't want to be your so-called friend. I don't want to see you. I'm doing great. Fui. So do me a favor and don't bother me anymore. Is it because of Arjun? He asked suddenly, his eyes narrowing, the old analyst in him kicking in. I frowned. What? Arjun, he repeated as if solving a puzzle. He's jealous. That's why he made you send that message. He won't let you add me back. A disbelieving laugh escaped me. Are you okay? Seriously, if Priya has you this worked up, go spout this nonsense to her, not me. Your psychological projections are not my problem. He listened and then a strange, petty smile curled his lips, a smile I'd never seen on him before. It was ugly. He took a long step closer, invading my personal space in a way that felt intentionally threatening. I didn't back down. Arjun is here, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. His eyes flicked over my shoulder. He's been standing over there by the science building for, 5 minutes now. Watching. Why do you think he hasn't come over? A chill that had nothing to do with the wind shot down my spine. I didn't turn. I refused to give him the satisfaction. How had I never noticed Rohan could be this petty, this manipulative? Back off, I said, my voice low and dangerous. When Arjun saw Rohan dip his head suddenly towards mine, saw the intimate distance between us from his vantage point, he couldn't stay put. He strode over, his boots crunching on the gravel path. His face was a mask of controlled fury. Rohan retreated 2 steps smoothly, putting a respectable distance between us. He gave the furious Arjun a mild, almost polite smile. Don't be mad. We were just talking. Then he turned back to me, his tone light, conversational. I'm heading out. Thief. Good night. Thief. My foot. He walked away, his black coat disappearing into the gloom, leaving a cloud of toxic confusion and reignited anger in his wake. Arjun didn't say a word. He just looked at me, his eyes blazing in the dim light. The jealousy I saw there was a little scary, but beneath it was a raw, vulnerable hurt that tugged at my heart. He's utterly ridiculous, I started, reaching for his hand. He didn't take it. He just turned and started walking, not towards his apartment but back the way he'd come. Let's go, was all he said, the words clipped. I followed him back to his apartment in a silence so thick it was suffocating. The familiar space felt different, charged with a negative energy. The door had barely shut behind us with a soft click when he turned. His kiss fell. It wasn't like the kisses we'd shared before, playful, tender, exploring. This was urgent, hungry, uneasy. It was a claim, a reassurance sought through physical possession. His hands framed my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks, but the kiss itself was desperate. He didn't stop until I was nearly breathless, my back against the cool wood of the door. He rested his forehead against mine, his breathing ragged. What did you talk about? He whispered, his voice rough. I opened my mouth to answer, to explain the absurdity of it all. He kissed me again, harder this time, swallowing my words. Don't, he breathed against my lips. I don't want to hear it. The kiss that followed was different. It was slow, deep, and drowning. It was an apology and a question and a plea all in one. It was sweet and devastating, and it melted the anger and fear between us, replacing it with a wave of aching tenderness. My legs felt weak, my knees buckling. A small, helpless sound slipped out of me. Arjun suddenly swept me up in his arms, cradling me against his chest. He carried me to the bedroom, not the living room, and laid me down on the dark duvet with a reverence that belied the fierceness of moments before. He leaned over me, brushing the stray hair from my brow with fingertips that trembled slightly. Firelit slivers burned in his fox-bright eyes in the semi-darkness. The streetlight cast his face in sharp angles and deep shadows. Maya, he said, his voice so soft it was almost inaudible. Can I? He was asking for more than a kiss. He was asking for trust, for surrender, for a final erasure of the ghost that had just haunted our doorstep. I didn't speak. I looped my arms around his neck, pulling him down to me, and answered with my body, with my lips, with the frantic beating of my heart against his. Later, much later, at the crest of a feeling so intense it blurred the lines between us, he nipped gently at my earlobe. His voice was strained, thick with emotion. "Who am I?" he asked into the skin of my neck. "Who's in your head right now? Do you love me?" Achum. He was seeking confirmation, a verbal tether in the storm of physical intimacy. When it was almost too much to bear, when the world had narrowed to the feel of him and the sound of our shared breath, all I could do was gasp his name again and again. Arjun. Arjun. And say I loved him over and over until the words lost meaning and became simply the truth of my pulse, my breath, my being. When I woke the next day, thin winter sunlight was striping the duvet, and the smell of something savory and complex filled the apartment. It was already past noon. I stretched, my body a symphony of pleasant aches and deep contentment. The frantic, desperate energy of the previous night had settled into a profound, humming peace. I found Arjun in the kitchen. 4 dishes and a soup were laid out on the small counter. Paneer tikka masala, glistening red, spinach dal, fluffy basmati rice, crispy okra, and a tomato shorba. It was a feast. He was concentrating on swirling cream into the dal, his brow furrowed. "You cooked all this?" I asked, my voice still sleep-soft. He jumped, then shot me a smile that was part pride, part shyness. "For my little foodie," he said. "Couldn't have you wasting away." I tasted each dish. The paneer was perfectly spiced, the okra crackled, the dal was creamy and comforting. "This is incredible," I said, my mouth full. "So good." He beamed, the shyness evaporating. "Well, I had a good teacher. My mom would disown me if I couldn't at least manage the basics." I finished eating, completely satiated. On an impulse, I snapped a picture of the colorful spread. Then I crooked a finger at him. "Come here." He put on a face of deep reluctance, sighing heavily, but came over with such honest eagerness it made my heart squeeze. I flipped the camera to selfie mode, wrapped my free arm around his neck and took our photo. In it, I'm smiling, my hair messy, my face bare. He's looking at me, not the camera, a soft, unguarded expression in his eyes that I'd never seen before. I ducked my head, fussing with my phone, cropping the photo, choosing a filter. He peered over my shoulder, his chin resting on my head. "What are you doing?" "Soft launching my happiness," I said, my voice muffled by his chest. He stiffened for a second. "What?" "I haven't posted about us yet." "About you?" "I'm going to." I tapped the screen, writing a caption. "Saturday sustenance. And the chef isn't bad either." He got awkward, pulling back slightly. "It's just 2 dishes. Hardly worth posting to the world." His sudden retreat, so at odds with the man who'd publicly claimed me at his birthday party, confused me. "Oh," I said, setting my phone face down on the counter with a soft click. "Then I won't." "No," he said quickly, then flushed, realizing he'd been caught. It's fine. Post it. If you want." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're impossible." Okay, posting." I hit share. He immediately pulled out his own phone and liked it. Then, the next second, his face darkened as if a cloud had passed over the sun. He stared at the screen, his brows drawn together. "What is it?" I asked, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind, resting my cheek against his back. He was silent for a long moment, then turned in my arms, his expression uncharacteristically somber. He held my gaze, his own searching, vulnerable. "I don't know why," he began, his voice low, "but I still feel unsafe." The word was a shock. "Unsafe? What do you mean?" He took a deep breath as if steeling himself. If Rohan really regretted things, if he decided to properly chase you back, to say all the right things he never said, would you dump me?" The bluntness of the question startled me. "You liked him for so long, Maya. 3 years. That doesn't just vanish." Something shifted inside me, a tectonic plate of understanding grinding into place. This was the difference between people. With Rohan, even in our most ambiguous moments, his feelings were a locked box. I had to guess, to interpret, to build castles out of crumbs. It was exhausting, a constant state of anxious uncertainty. Arjun was different. He laid his insecurities bare. He asked the terrifying questions. It was messy and vulnerable, but it was real. It kindled a protective fire in my chest. I caught his hand, lacing our fingers together. "Don't spiral," I said softly. "Okay? Listen to me." He nodded, his eyes wide and serious, fixed on my face. "I don't know the future," I began, choosing my words with care. "Who does?" For all you know, you might fall for some brilliant, beautiful architect someday and leave me in the dust. I won't, he interjected immediately, fiercely. It's a hypothetical, I said, squeezing his hand. I'm not saying you will. Hey, you're derailing me. Don't interrupt. He fell quiet, his beautiful dark pupils bright as though cupping a sky full of stars. Okay, he whispered. Say it. I can't guarantee how we'll be years from now. No one can. That's the scary and wonderful part. But what's past is past. I won't look back and I won't regret it. I took a step closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. Not liking someone means not liking them. It's not a pause button. It's a full stop. Whatever Rohan does, whatever he says, has nothing to do with me anymore. He's a chapter 1 read, cried over and closed. Permanently. I saw the tension begin to leave his shoulders. All I can hold is now, I continued, bringing our joined hands to my chest, over my heart. And I will cherish what I have with you right here, right now. I choose you, Arjun. Not as a rebound, not as a consolation prize. I choose you. He looked so moved, his eyes shimmering. Then one beat later, his analytical brain re-engaged. What do you mean you can't guarantee later? He asked, a flicker of the old possessive worry returning. Spell that out. Are you saying you'll change your mind? This childish, wonderful man. I ignored him and bent to clear the dishes, hiding my smile. Why? He was behind me, his arms sliding around my waist, his chin on my shoulder. When I still wouldn't answer, he waited until I'd put the last plate in the sink. Then his fingers found my ribs. I'm deathly ticklish. A shriek of laughter escaped me as I tried to wriggle away. Say it, he demanded, laughing himself as we stumbled into the living room. No. Stop. I gasped, tears of mirth streaming down my face. He wore me out, tumbling us onto the sofa, until I was breathless and promising again and again. No, I won't change my mind. Absolutely not. You're stuck with me. He finally relented, holding me close, both of us breathless and grinning. That night, as we lay in the dark, he somehow returned to the topic, his voice a sleepy murmur against my hair. You're sure? Even if he... Arjun, go to sleep, I mumbled, elbowing him gently. Just checking. He was quiet for a long time. I thought he'd drifted off. Then his arm tightened around me, pulling me closer. Why, he said, his voice now clear and awake. We're about to graduate. The words landed with a soft thud. It was true. Finals were a blur on the horizon, then cap and gowns, then the great wide open. Yeah, I whispered. Almost there. What are your plans? He asked. After. I didn't have to think. I'll probably stay in the city. It's close to home. My parents are here. There are good jobs in my field. It's easy to live in. I felt him nod against me. Then I'll stay in the city too, he said without a pause, as if it were the most obvious conclusion in the world. I propped myself up on one elbow to peer at him in the faint light from the window. Seriously? That casual? What about your offer? The one in Bangalore. He'd been offered a prestigious position at a cutting-edge tech startup there, a dream job he'd worked for years to get. He palmed the back of my head, his touch tender. What's casual about it? I've long since planned for after graduation. Whatever you choose, I've got an answer. He sounded insufferably pleased with himself. I lay back down on him, smiling into the darkness. You're great. I've had my eye on you for years, he murmured, his hand stroking my hair. Finally got to be your boyfriend. If I don't plan, I'll lose you again. I'm not letting that happen. Arjun, I said, a thought occurring to me. I found a major advantage of yours. What? You pitch fastballs. No hesitation. I like it. His hand in my hair paused. Then in a smooth motion he flipped us, pinning me gently beneath him. I let out a small yelp of surprise. He grinned down at me, his teeth a white flash in the dark. Wicked, he said, his voice dropping to a husky murmur. I've got plenty more major advantages. He put a suggestive, playful weight on the word, major. Want to test them? My face went hot. Outside, the first fat drops of a spring rain began to lash against the window pane, a sudden, insistent rhythm. Inside, the world was warm and safe and full of a future we were building, one fastball, one whispered promise, one shared meal at a time. The spring rain turned into a gentle drizzle by morning, washing the city clean. The air smelled of wet earth and blossoming jasmine from the vine on Arjun's fire escape. Graduation was a whirlwind of black gowns, flying tassels, proud parents with oversized bouquets, and a dizzying sense of culmination. Amidst the chaos, I saw Rohan once. He was across the crowded lawn, accepting his diploma, his face a polite mask. Priya was not with him. I heard through the relentless university gossip mill that they had broken up again, this time supposedly for good. The news registered with the same impact as a weather report from a distant country, mildly interesting but irrelevant to my day. My world had condensed to a tight, bright circle. My family, Ananya, and my roommates, and Arjun. At the post-graduation party my parents threw in our backyard, Arjun stood by my side, effortlessly charming my mother with his knowledge of spices and making my stoic father laugh with stories of his own father's disastrous attempts at gardening. He fit. It was easy. Later that week we moved. Not in together. That felt like a step for a future a little further down the road, but into apartments in the same neighborhood, a trendy, leafy sector of the city known for its cafes and old trees. His place was a spacious one-bedroom with a view of the park. Mine was a sunlit studio 2 blocks away. The distance felt symbolic. 2 independent orbits choosing to be in constant, close proximity. One evening, about a month into this new postgraduate life, I was at Arjun's, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes of his books. We were supposed to be organizing, but had gotten distracted by an old photo album he'd found. "Look at you," I giggled, pointing at a picture of a gangly teenage Arjun with terrible glasses and a triumphant hold on a debate trophy. "A nerd." I knew it. "A champion nerd," he corrected, snatching the album away. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at it and his easy smile vanished. "What?" I asked, wiping dust from my hands. He didn't answer, just handed me the phone. It was an email. The subject line read, "Follow up. Bangalore offer, start date confirmation?" My heart stuttered. I looked up at him. "They're pushing for an answer." He took the phone back, tossed it onto the sofa as if it were hot, and ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah. Our plan had been for him to negotiate remote work or find a similar position here. The Bangalore offer was spectacular, a once-in-a-career launchpad. "You should do the video call with them tomorrow," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. "Hear them out properly." He stared at me. "Why, no, listen." I took his hand. "We made a plan based on me staying here. But we never really talked about you going there. Not seriously. I won't be the reason you turn down a dream. I won't be that weight." "You're not a weight," he said fiercely. "You're the reason I want to stay." "I know," I said, smiling. "And that means more to me than you can imagine. But love shouldn't be about closing doors. It should be about figuring out how to walk through them together, even if they're far apart for a while." The next day he took the call in his home office. I paced in the living room, my stomach in knots. I meant what I'd said, but the thought of him leaving, of this new beautiful thing being stretched across 1,000 miles, terrified me. He emerged an hour later, his expression inscrutable. "Well?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He walked over, took both my hands in his, and took a deep breath. I told them I was incredibly grateful, but that my life was here. My heart sank even as a selfish part of it sang. "Arjun, you didn't have to." "I didn't finish," he interrupted, a slow grin spreading across his face. "I told them my life was here, but that I believed I could do the job from here for the first 6 months, with bi-monthly trips to Bangalore. I proposed a trial period. A remote first arrangement." My jaw dropped. You negotiated that?" "On the spot." He shrugged, trying for nonchalance and failing miserably, his eyes sparkling with triumph. "I had a good case. My final year project is directly applicable to their core problem. I had data. And," he squeezed my hands, "I had motivation." "What did they say?" "They said they'd never done it, but for me they'd consider it. They're drawing up a revised offer." He pulled me into a crushing hug. 6 months. We see how it goes. If it works, I stay. If it doesn't, we cross that bridge then. Together." It was a compromise, but a brilliant, forward-thinking one. It was us. A few nights later, we were celebrating his revised offer at our favorite tiny Italian place when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. "Unknown. Maya, it's Rohan. Heard you're still in the city." "Am too." Would be good to catch up, clear the air. As friends. I showed it to Arjun. He read it, his jaw tightening for a second. Then he took a slow sip of his wine and looked at me. What do you want to do? This was it, the final test. Not of my feelings for Rohan. Those ashes were cold. But of my commitment to a future free of old ghosts. I picked up my phone. I didn't type a reply to the text. Instead, I opened my contacts, found the number I'd blocked months ago and permanently deleted it. Then I blocked the new number. I placed the phone back on the table, screen down. I don't want coffee, I said simply. I have everything I need right here. Arjun didn't smile. He just looked at me with a depth of understanding that took my breath away. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. No words were needed. Walking home, hand in hand under a canopy of stars that seemed brighter now, away from the university's light pollution, I felt a chapter not just close, but seal itself shut. The girl who waited for texts, who parsed meanings from silences, who built her happiness on the shifting sand of someone else's affection, she was gone. In her place was a woman who knew what she wanted, who had fought for her peace, and who had found a love that was not a question but an answer. Hey, Arjun said, breaking the comfortable silence. Remember that first hot pot? When you were so hungover you accused me of giving you a fever. I groaned. Don't remind me. I knew then, he said, his voice soft. Knew what? That I was going to marry you someday. I stopped walking, turning to face him right there on the quiet tree-lined street. The world narrowed to his face, lit by the soft glow of a vintage street lamp. There was no ring, no grand gesture. Just a statement, simple and sure as the sunrise. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were tears of joy, of a future so bright it hurt to look at directly. I stood on my toes and kissed him, a kiss that held the memory of every shattered piece he'd helped me glue back together, and the promise of a million moments yet to come. I know, I whispered against his lips. And I did. The end.